Good morning, everybody. Welcome to More on Mondays here on a beautiful Monday morning. Are you all ready? Been thinking about this quite a bit. Got your coffee? Got your notes? Maybe a notepad of some kind just to write things down? Got your Bible? And then if you've got any questions, hey, on the Grace app, there's a thing on the Grace app. I'll show you right now so you can see it. When you open the Grace app, and it comes out like this. One of the key ones there is it says send your questions right there. Send your questions to Pastor Des. You can just do that. They come direct to me and I can see them. So as you go, we can do this. A couple of you sent some questions in and I responded directly through email to those questions rather than do them here. But if it's a question that I think everybody, a lot of people want to know, I'll address it here. Let's just go with this today. Trying to keep it a bit shorter and I may just do it in sections. Here we go. So yesterday we talked about Jesus being the I am, the light of the world, and I went with these steps all the way back, and it all originates with the beginning. I believe really this is so important, the renewal of all things. And so what I did yesterday in going back to Genesis 1:1 is often when you study, you can apply what we call the principle of the first mention. When was the first time in the scriptures that was made, that was suggested, alluded to? So when it came to light and darkness, when's the first time we encounter that phrase in the scriptures? Well, obviously it was back in Genesis 1, and so it's a really good thing to do sometimes, to go, when was this first said? When did God first say this? And Jesus being the light of the world was referring back right to the beginning, to who he is. I'm going to go through some of the things I said yesterday, add some questions in for you to think about, a few more little bits of information. So are you ready? Let's go. So we started off the I am the light of the world. What was it about Jesus? Let me just read the text. John 8. We're in John chapter 8. John chapter 8 verse 12. Then Jesus spoke again to the people and said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The Pharisees challenged him. Here you are, appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus then gets into this conversation, a dialogue with the Pharisees. Why were they so enraged that Jesus was saying himself, he is the light of the world? They said, this doesn't make sense. Your testimony is not valid. Prove it. That whole really going on, because Jesus was saying, he was saying, I am God. He was alluding to that. Pretty powerful. No wonder they were irate. And often we read in the Bible, why did people get so angry at Jesus to want him crucified? There's a cultural miss, that's why. So the Pharisees were like, you can't say this, but he can, because he is the light of the world. So, moving on with that, I want to ask you a question. Who is Jesus and who is Jesus to you? Where do you feel challenged, or where do you feel society pushes back on Jesus? I often think the society pushes back on a cultural Christianity, a political Christianity, maybe the church, less than Jesus. But do they really, have they created Jesus in their own image? So who is Jesus, and where do you find there's a challenge, there's a pushback, even from people of influence? So here's the Pharisees, people of influence, and they push back on Jesus. But let's go down to your own life. Where do you find yourself going, Jesus, I'm not so sure about that yet? A pushing back on Jesus, or a taking control again. No, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to sort this one out. Jesus' kingdom just seems too radical at this time. Just have a ponder on that for a minute. All right, so here we go. These three statements. Jesus said, first of all, I am the light of the world. Secondly, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So light of the world, we said yesterday, Genesis 1, light comes in, life starts, because life was there. And God said, let there be light, and then things start to grow and start to form. The formless becomes formed, the empty becomes filled, because the darkness is pierced by the light. But whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. Keeping it simple, if you are in Christ, you have the light. Darkness is simply a word that describes the absence of light. Darkness really isn't a thing as such, it's an absence of light. So if I have the light in me, I don't have darkness. Now, I may feel that my circumstances are dark, but I don't walk in darkness because I have the light. Dwell on that. So if you find yourself in dark spaces, dark places, I'm talking relationally, emotionally, even physically, you've got to come back to a true statement. And Jesus said, but I am the light of the world. If you are in me, you are a new creation. You have that light. The enemy just wants to come and say, really, 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 like he did in Genesis, did God really say? And create some doubt in there. Now, moving on, but we'll have the light of life. This life is not everything. We have an eternity. Remember the palingenesia, the renewal of all things. You'll have the light of life. We've got more I ams to talk about in Jesus, and obviously one of them is the life. I am the way, truth, and the life. And I even alluded to yesterday with John 10:10, which goes into almost into next week's message of I am the gate, or I am the door. So you'll have this light of life. Now, I just want to step in a little bit because it is early May and we have this COVID-19 situation in the world. So I alluded yesterday to this expert in Minnesota who talks about he talks about infectious disease specialists, and he says, okay, we have a blizzard, then we have winter, then we have a little ice age. I want to lead into this because it applies to you personally. Are you still living your life like it was a blizzard? I hope you're not. That panic, that here we go, but we know it's going longer than a blizzard. It's formless. Then we have a winter, and a winter is a season. And we're in a season of a winter all over the world right now, with things being taken away. There's things we cannot do because it is, just illustration here, winter. There's things you cannot do in winter that you can do in the spring and the summer. And then we have this little ice age. The impact of all of that can go on for quite some time. So let me just say this. Yes, the world is never going to be the same again. With any major crisis in the world, it will never be the same again. But I'll say it again. Disruption, crisis, is the best cradle for innovation. You see, life today isn't what it was back in the days of the scriptures. The culture, the way we do life, and say the method of how we do life is constantly changing. This is just a big change. But the mission never changes. So even when we go back on a Sunday and come back together as a church, it's going to be different. It's never going to be the same again, but we've got to ask ourselves, so Lord, what is your mission and how do we fulfill your mission? We're going to follow you, be changed by you, and join you on your mission, not the methods. The methods can come and they can go, and if we're all tied into the methods, we often miss the mission. What is the best way we can fulfill the mission God has called us to? What about you in your life? What is the mission God has called you to? The methods are going to change and have been changing. Let's be prepared again to listen and go, okay, Lord, what is your mission? This is what we're going to be about. As a leader, it's keeping me up at night. As a leader, my brain's going like, wow, thinking about this, researching. But it's so relevant, because if Jesus says you don't have to go about this in darkness, you don't have to go about this season formless, empty darkness, you don't need to. I am the light of the world. And so quite literally you find yourself going, okay, Jesus, in this situation, turn the light on. I cannot see what we need to do. Turn the light on. What is it in your life? Maybe right now it's your relationships, maybe it's a loneliness, maybe it's Still an element of fear and uncertainty. Maybe it's related to your job or your family. You've got family members with all of those things. There's so many things right now, but this is what you need to. It's happening everywhere. But either Jesus is the light of the world or he isn't. He's not just the light of the world when things are great. He's the light of the world. And you have to stand on that truth. Stand on that truth. Really stand on that truth. I tell you what, I'm going to keep it brief today and just go into something that I think's really, 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 really important. I mentioned this yesterday, and let me pastor you at this time. In every situation, you respond like they did in the scriptures here with one of three ways to negatively respond to a challenge or a crisis. The bad way to respond is fight, flight, or freeze. I've recognized all three. I've done all three in different circumstances, and this is what's important. In this situation, Jesus comes in. Prior to him saying, I'm the light of the world in the scriptures, the start of John 8 is Jesus rescuing the woman caught in adultery, who was going to be stoned, and they weren't really interested in her. They were interested in trapping Jesus, yes, we know, and there's a whole story behind all of that, but they came with a situation and they presented Jesus with a crisis. They put him on the spot. They wanted to turn the heat up and put him under pressure and try and get him to collapse, try and get him to be caught off guard. The fight mindset, which is what the Pharisees do against Jesus afterwards with what he says. The fight mindset is get angry. I'm going to push against this. This is not right. This is not fair. Do you find yourself in this season being much shorter, sharper with people reacting, responding? I've shared with you about this. I have been. Just like overreacting to situations, getting frustrated when things don't quite go right. You know, we've had multiple things in the home that suddenly break or don't work, and you have to fix this, and you go, oh, not again, not again. It's just life. You know, it's just life. Something goes wrong with a car, or something goes wrong with a water heater or an AC unit or something with your pool. It's just life. But right now, you go, really? Like right now, really? A fight mindset. And Jesus didn't fight when he's brought this woman caught in adultery. The opposite, the next one is we could then what we call flight. We just want to fly away. We want to avoid everything. We just want to avoid it, and we don't want to know, and we avoid it. And sometimes that running away from something isn't a right thing to do either. When Jesus presented with this woman, he could have gone, not my problem. Not my problem. I don't know this woman. This is what you want to do. Do whatever you want to do, guys. He could have just let them. You know, he could have gone, oh, okay. But instead he engages, because he rescues this woman, and he engages where they are with their hearts. Often Jesus comes to me, comes to you, and he wants to bring like a brutal, whoa, here's a quick check. Here's a quick check. We know Jesus said, let he is without sin. Some translations would say, let he is without this same sin, which makes that whole story even more amazing. Cast the first stone. Sometimes he wants to pull you up and go, whoa, hang on a minute. And then sometimes you just fly. No, I don't want to talk about this right now. I'm out. I'm going to run away. I'm out. I don't want to engage in a fight. I'm out. And then thirdly, the freeze one. And the freeze one is there's a paralysis. You just don't know what to do at all, and you're frozen. And so you do nothing. You don't fight. You don't flight. You freeze, and there's a paralysis, and you're gripped with fear, and it holds you back. I imagine this woman caught in adultery was freeze. I mean, she couldn't run. She couldn't fight. She just frozen in absolute terror and fear. And we know what Jesus does. He literally is the light of the world to her darkest possible hour, her darkest moment, relationally, emotionally, physically. And Jesus is the light of the world. That's when he goes and declares what it is. Oh, by the way, the Feast of Tabernacles has just happened in this season in the scriptures here. Even says in John 7, the Feast of Tabernacles, without getting too deep, Jesus was That festival was to remind God's people of God's provision of shelter during the time in the wilderness. But how did God lead Israel, God's people, in that season? Fire by night, cloud by day. What by night? A fire. A light in the darkness. He led them as a light in the darkness in that time. And they've been in the middle of that whole celebration, remembering that. And Jesus comes in and says, oh yeah, I'm here to lead you out of darkness. Fight, flight, freeze. None of those three options are the ones we should take. We should take the trust Jesus one. He is the light of the world. And with some strength and boldness, by faith, we go, I trust you, Jesus. Help me to display the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, not fight. Help me to display those, not flight. And also help me to have this boldness and confidence that comes by grace through faith, that says, I don't need to freeze. I can trust you in this. Isn't it amazing? Jesus talking about light, and even in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, guys, don't worry about today and don't worry about tomorrow. I've got this. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you as well. Send in your questions. I know I kind of looked at this, and maybe it's to do with those festivals, maybe it's to do with culture and context, but I wanted to lean in and say, how do we lead in this situation? We are really entering into this little ice age where everything's going to be different. But do not fear. Do not fear. My whole 2019 word was fearless. Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will help you, support you, uphold you with my righteous right hand. My word for this year is the word strong. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Yeah, remember that. Remember that. So we're going to come through this, but how we come through it, Jesus is saying, trust me, I'm the light of the world. How you come through this will be down to who are you with in it. Who are you with in it. There's my musings. I've hardly drunk my coffee this morning because we've been talking so much. Share with me more what you need me to talk about on Mondays. We'll get to continue. Join us Tuesdays at noon for prayer. Thursdays at 7 for prayer. They're increasing, I think, in their dynamism as we continue. Connect with people. If you need a group to connect with, there's so many groups happening over Zoom right now. It's not like we prefer in person, don't we? Let's just be honest. But yeah, it's thanks for taking the time to do this and to listening to me. Good. All right. Take care, everybody. Share it with other people if you want. And ask away. Ask away. Use the app. All right, everybody. Have a great week. This first full week in May. And I'll speak to you again really soon.